back with the 𝐂𝐏𝟔 podcast. My guest today is James Hobson, who is the CEO of Ratoon. When you go onto their LinkedIn site, I love the little tagline. Instead of something lengthy, which is just confusing, it's insurance as easy as it should be. So James, welcome to the hot seat.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. I appreciate it.
So insurance as easy as it should be. Explain.
Well, I think it's meant to be simple because that's what we want to deliver. And so I think there's really three components when you want to break that down. First and foremost, I should say we are entirely focused on how we help small businesses. So think about those Main Street businesses that you see across the country. That is who we want to help make insurance easier and better for. And the three components of that are pretty simple. These are not earth-shattering, but it starts with how do you create a great customer experience? And I'm a believer that you can do that in two ways. You can do that by providing something that's truly enjoyable and joy to somebody. As much as I've grown to love insurance, and those who know us in insurance might want to, sort of say we provide joy. Probably not the great experience that we're talking about here. So the second thing is you really can remove friction and you can make it a much more seamless and easier transaction. So we obsess around how we can make that buying experience easier and better for that small business owner. And we can talk more about how we do that because I think that there's some misconceptions about how that's happening in the market. But that's the first component. The second component is we want to be able to provide that business with really a one-stop shop. And if you think about it, there's very core components that most small businesses need in terms of their insurance, whether that's property, liability, workers' compensation, auto, et cetera. So we're on a journey to build that one-stop shop for those small businesses. And then the last thing is we really believe we can underwrite this segment better. And that's because we believe we can bring new technology, new data to bear. We can get more granular in terms of how we can quantify the risk and then price that risk. And that's important because on the back end, you still need somebody to honor that risk. Insurance is a contract, and it's a contract to be there when the business needs them. And so we want to make sure that we're the most efficient path and we're the best path because of the way that we can underwrite to matching that business owner to the right capital provider who wants to sort of take on and insure that risk.
Okay. So let me clarify. Are you D to C or are you D to B to C?
So if the B means broker,
yes,
yeah, we're D to B to C. So, and I think that's a really great question because it wasn't obvious to me. We've been doing this about 3 years at Ratoon now that would be the case. I came from a fintech company where we took on the challenge of small business lending, and there a great customer experience was direct to C being the small business owner. Yep. But here, the first thing that we did was we wanted to really understand what makes a great experience. And so we went out and we talked to a lot of business owners. We actually talked to a lot of brokers who were serving them. And insurance is still very complicated, right? So if you think about where insurance is today and where a lot of, we're all insurtechs, things that we've been doing, we're still selling a somewhat complicated product. And we maybe have made it easier. But you take our core BOP policy, it's still a 60, 75-page policy that somebody has to understand. And so as we did that research, we really found that the business owners wanted an advisor. And brokers are that advisor. They want somebody who knows enough about insurance and knows enough about their insurance who can tell them what's right for them. Yep. So then once we figured that out, we've been trying to build a platform and trying to learn more in terms of how can we actually make that broker to business owner experience more efficient, better, more enjoyable, and we keep every day trying to improve upon that.
Yep. Was your first set of instincts to go directly to the customer since you had that experience in the past?
Yes. So if we were having this conversation, call it a little over 3 years ago, and we were getting ready to start Ratoon, I would have said one of my hypotheses was that we would have some direct test in the market within 12 months. Couldn't have told you what it would have been, which type of customer, which type of product that we would want to match to them. But that was my going-in assumption. And it just didn't prove out to be true.
Was there any pieces of evidence that you can recall that began to nudge you that, hey, because you're making a bet, right? You're making a bet on the broker agent environment that there'll still be a need for a trusted environment. What did you see that convinced you that that relationship between the customer and the broker could withstand time?
So I think the main thing that we heard from customers was just the amount of complexity in the product.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't, hey, it's complex, but I think if somebody unpacks it for me, I can understand it and maybe do it myself. It's super complex and I'm not really sure I want to understand it. So if somebody can just help me. Now it wasn't the feedback we got wasn't that, oh, everything that I do with my broker today is perfect. Right?
Probably the opposite.
Yeah, there were so many still areas where, oh, well, this is frustrating and that's frustrating.
Yep.
But the fundamental thing that we believe is they want an advisor. And so if you play that forward, it doesn't mean that the role of an advisor or who is advising them is not going to change. It just means that we think that advice is going to be a core component of a great customer experience on a go-forward basis.
Yep. And it sounds like with your particular business model, the way you are able to get data as well, you have the ability to also make the advisor a better advisor.
Correct.
So you can almost close the loop on that, and it amplify who are your customers, who are your brokers. You can almost make them better advisors.
That is absolutely our goal. And I think you can do that in multiple ways. So we can make them a better advisor because we can take the friction out of it, and we can enable them to sell a $5,000 bot policy in 3 to 4 minutes, right? Because we've taken all of the friction and put it on our platform. Now, when they call that broker, they don't have to call that information or say, did you give us, answer question number 45 correctly? Yeah. What they're talking about is, let's talk about, how much risk you want to offload and what you're willing to pay for it. That's ultimately what it comes down to. Then what we can also do is we can make brokers confident enough, maybe if they haven't been serving the small business market today, well, we can help you kind of take your first steps to serve that market, because we can tell you based on our data, okay, well, if you're out there talking to a flower shop, if you're out there talking to sort of the local restaurants, here's kind of 3 bundles that typically get purchased, right? Mm-hmm. Now they can start with those rather than trying to sort of explain coverages or start with just the price, which actually avoids the most important thing, which is the actual coverage they're getting for that. Yeah. So we really think that you hit the nail on the head. We believe we can make that a much better, much more data-driven experience.
Yeah, it sounds like the Amazon thing where you search for something and it said people who search for this also ended up buying this, right? So you can get to not only combine, hey, here are the coverages and we can make it easier for you to enter this stuff in, but here are some things you may not have thought about.
That's correct. Yeah, I think that's right. And that's a journey, just like, if you go back and think about the early Amazon recommendation tools, maybe you got some things that were a little off, and then over time those models improve. And so we're on a very similar journey, which is, literally every month that goes by, our ability to predict certain things actually improves based upon the data and the experience that we've been able to have. And we're now, we're like everyone else, we're trying to build scale. So you start small, you start with a small amount of data, and then ultimately you can build scale, and then your models become more predictive, and sort of the variability or the standard deviations of those models also come down.
Yeah. So the small business sphere has become sexy, right? Who would have thought, right? And so kudos.
I don't know about that, but I'll take it.
Kudos to you and your team for recognizing what a lot of other smart people recognize too, is that small business has a lot of friction. There's the ability you can make an underwriting profit. And if you can kind of connect a lot of dots here, there is the opportunity to scale this up. So given that others, Berkshire Hathaway, AIG, some of these other companies have also made a big splash into the small business part, could you discuss? I like to want to give you an opportunity to kind of differentiate yourself from those. What's the same? What's different? And why should a broker approach Attune to get their quote and other information?
Yeah, great, fair question. I would explain it as there's a lot of things that incumbents and carriers are doing that are really good today. And I've found that to be very sort of refreshing about the insurance industry. It was much more responsive, much more, I would say, collaborative than lending where I came from was. But there's a blending that really needs to happen where you have to really blend insurance, knowledge, and people, but with a very strong desire to do it better, with technology people who quite frankly know nothing about insurance, but really deeply understand how you build a customer experience or how you build a platform where one of the challenges I've seen is you build a platform and you think you're building a platform and it's going to support 2, 3, 4, 5 products. And the reality is you're building a platform for one product. So you've seen some of those things play out when you don't get a blending of the two. And so I think what we really have is we have a tremendous team, and we've been very fortunate just to blend that. It's something that from day one we've been purposefully doing. And then I think the second thing is I don't think everyone understands the degree of difficulty, right? And the degree of difficulty is not this in that you have to invent something that hasn't been invented before. That's really hard. I am certainly not smart enough to do that. But I think what there's tendencies to do is to say, okay, well, all I have to do is build, a digital front end experience, and now I'm going digital. That absolutely does not work. You have to really build a full stack solution where day one, a startup like us or any company, you can't do and own everything, but you actually have to build a technology stack that will let you do that. And in some sense, this is why I believe, like I've talked about this in other places, like fintech looks a lot like SaaS. You have to build a full stack end-to-end platform to serve one customer well. But if you do it right, you can get true economies of scale. So, I think we differentiate because we have an amazing digital front end that's entirely flexible. It can be delivered in, multiple spots. It can be customized for multiple experiences, but it's literally the same front end. And then everything hits the same underwriting platform. And there's different components. As we want to take on more complex risks, there might be a node on our platform that would be referral underwriting. And, insurtechs are not supposed to talk about referral underwriting. But it's a pretty important component of trying to get some risks.
Completely. Yeah.
Now, the way that we might do referral underwriting is probably different than the way, a very traditional carrier would. But that's just a node on our platform, and that node is going to be off for, say, BOP. Our BOP experience and the way that we underwrite and price is 100% automated. And there's a lot of advantages to that. You don't want to introduce people because that screws up your data. But if we're going to do something else, we might want to have that node, but it's on the same platform.
Yeah. It's that referral thing. You're the first person that's ever brought this up in a podcast that I have done, which is amazing because I don't think I go throughout without a day without some sort of referral in many different ways. And I was speaking to someone yesterday who's kind of an expert in how things operate in California. And not only is he growing his brokerage business in California, but now he's able to allow folks from other countries that may have like a warehouse in California, he can secure coverage from that as a referral, right? Or someone from a different state that just might have some ancillary coverage, and they're just like, how am I going to do this? Do I have to get licensed in California? They don't have to get licensed. Like the way insurance operates with referrals is really complex because it truly is a relationship business. So it's not like you can take the rest of the account.
Right.
It's this, you might get a piece of it, or it can be something more complex than that, but there's so many different ways things get referred or moved around that I think is just really underappreciated outside of insurance.
I think that's right. And I think the way we think about it is we want to make sure that we have a path and a journey if we're going to launch a product that we believe we can underwrite it better than the market. Now that takes time. So when we're 18 months in, and you know, we're not perfect with everything we do, but we're not going to say 18 months into this we can underwrite better than the market. That would be crazy, and quite frankly, I wouldn't believe it if somebody told me that. But what we want to show is that we can bring new data, or we can look at it more granularly. Or, for example, if we don't think our platform can answer everything, but we think the platform can handle, say, 90%, well, then we can bring a person in a very efficient way to do 2 or 3 checks that help us get comfortable with that incremental 10%. And then over time, we think that we can take that down, but we might use a person while we train our models. So I think it's really powerful when you think about it as a step in the evolution. But our ingoing hypothesis for any product we do has to be that over time, we can underwrite this as well or better than anyone in the market, and do it with data and efficiently.
Let me, can I throw that back at you and try to understand what you just said? Are you saying that you're willing to underwrite at the same level if you think there is an opportunity to underwrite at a much better level? Like, you're willing to put that time and investment in, keep it, you know, square with what the rest of the market's doing, knowing that, hey, we're probably just, you know, a few pieces of information or a little bit of tweaking to our, or calibrating to our model to really turning this into something that's very profitable. Did I learn that correctly?
Yeah, and that's 100% correct. And I just don't think, this is where I think, again, where you talk about kind of our approach as a newer startup, or, you know, I think we're entering sort of the growth stage now, which is a good thing, but versus maybe the more traditional players, you can't skip over the learning phase, right? If you're going to do it differently, there's inherently in that different approach, there's going to be some additional risk. So the question is, how do you quantify that? How do you show that you're bringing in things to address that risk? And then what can you show as a reasonable time to sort of say, okay, we're going to train and learn. And so, you know, but yeah, so that's exactly kind of what we're.
Yep. How do you incorporate product design? And specifically, I'm thinking of policy forms, coverage types, you know, all of the bells and whistles that probably make insurance super complex, because someone looking at the policy form will say, I don't understand what I'm reading here. I don't know if it's covered. But that's something that could separate a company apart from someone else, aside from just the traditional underwriting. How do you think about product design?
So I think about it in probably 2 ways that are pretty high level, because I am definitely not an expert in insurance. We have those here, which is great. So I think there's 2 things, which is, largely speaking, most of the products that like kind of the insurtech community are bringing to market right now are commodity products that are either ISO based or admitted products. Mm-hmm. You know, the forms honestly are fairly traditional. You know, I don't love that our BOP is still 70 pages, but it is. Now that fits with the broker who's selling it. And so what we've tried to do is we've tried to take that base form, and how can we introduce some level of customization? How can we give that broker more control to actually understand their customer better, and then maybe add some endorsements that are pretty specific to the type of business or their location or the combination of those 2 things. And so those are things that we've been developing over the last year that we're excited to bring to the market, because you start with the sort of same base, but then you can sort of customize on top of it, right? Yep. So I think that that's part of it. And then the second part is we think that there's ways that you can try to look at some of those more complex risks, and you can try to think through, okay, how might I creatively structure this where maybe I can get some pricing flexibility that I would want, but still do it where you can have the ease of an admitted product. And there's ways to do that. That's a little bit harder to do than creating sort of a set of endorsements. But you know, we've really started to think about and really take that challenge on over the last 6 to 12 months.
Yeah. Are there any lines of business within Attune that are more attractive than others that you find that is really resonating, whether it be auto or property or whatever, or cyber?
So today we have 3 products, and we have a BOP product, which was the first product we launched. We have an excess product that sits on top of the BOP, and then we have a workers' comp product. And so those are the 3 products that are in the market today. Any one of them takes about 3 minutes to get from that process of going through the quote to have a bindable quote. Obviously, there's back and forth between the. Very rarely does somebody log in and bind a quote within 3 minutes, but that's the amount of effort it takes, and then they talk to their customer. So yeah, as we think about the product roadmap over the next couple years, we think that we can continue to round it out. So we have a skinny bop, but ultimately there's some customers who just need a monoline gel product. That's not something that we have today. Fairly logical if we say we want to have a one-stop shop, that's something that we would add. But then we also think that, as I said, there's opportunities to look at some of the more complex risks. And then you can think about trying to create bundles where, everyone wants to write the medical office BOP because that's a great exposure. But the reality is their pain point is really more the professional liability.
Yeah.
So we're starting to think about how do you put those together, again, with that simple goal of, do we think that we can underwrite it better? And then if so, can we create a unique and much better customer experience for that broker and the business owner?
Yeah. So you brought up medical offices. You also brought up flower shops. Is there a particular type of small business that you find you're attracting a lot by, whatever, advertising or by chance, you're attracting a lot of them?
Yeah, the answer is not really. We really have, today we offer almost 400 classes on our BOP product, very broad offering. Our goal is to really be there for Main Street America. Small businesses are awesome. They truly are the backbone of our economy. I know it's cliche to say, but I've been fortunate enough really over the last 9 years to get to know a lot of them. So no, our goal is really to be broad and to be there for those Main Street businesses. And so therefore we have a pretty wide offering.
Yeah. So in terms of, you're part of the InsurTech ecosystem now. And so what do you look for your hires? So you have, you have technical folks that you're trying to hire, but you need domain specific folks as well. So how do you and folks that need to fit into your culture, how do you make decisions about who's going to be a good fit, given that for a technical person, InsurTech may not be the sexiest thing? Although I said small business is sexy, maybe it is, but
yeah, we still have some room to go in the tech community. So I don't know that we're popping up on the top 5 sexy list. So I think, look, it's a great question. I think there's a few things that we look for really in anyone. And ultimately, we want people who just want to be part of building something great, and that is something that you can tell by talking to them, by decisions they've made in terms of their prior roles. It doesn't mean that they've all been part of startups, by the way. There's a lot of people who build not within the startup community. But ultimately, we're on a journey here, and we think we have an opportunity to build a pretty special company. That really resonates with people. And then ultimately, what we want to make sure they understand is if you come from technology, we make sure we talk to you about insurance and some of the challenges that we're seeing. And we let people know these are things that we're working on today that you would be working on. Is that exciting to you? And the flip for someone from insurance is, we'll go deep on, hey, this is how we've thought about the insurance problem, but we're thinking about it differently than probably, if you're coming from a carrier based here in New York, that you thought about it.
Yeah.
How engaged are you in that question? And so I think that you can get a pretty good sense. We often ask people to do exercises through the interview process, and it's really a sampling of work you might do, and then come in and talk about it. And I know when I interview people and we do these exercises, I said, look, if this is not fun, if you don't enjoy this, you probably shouldn't join us, because this is what we do on a day-to-day basis. And so I think we've built a really great team. We're probably just over 120 people now. And I think that the last thing we look for is just a high degree of people who want to have impact. One of, I think, our biggest and our best values is no costumes, right? We are hiring you. We don't want you to walk through our doors and feel like you have to be somebody else to be successful at work who's different than who you are when you're outside of work. And so we want everything about you, but the trade for that is we want you to have impact. We want you to take on something we're working on. We want you to know that you're probably in a year going to try some things and fail, and that's fantastic. As long as we're learning, that's part of the journey we're on. So, so I think, and the great thing is there's a ton of people, whether they come from the insurance world or the technology world, who really want to be part of something like that.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. Like the young professionals who, are coming into the workforce, they're not buying insurance, right? They know very little about it, so of course it's not sexy. In my experience, when you have a chance to show, like, this is what we do, this is the financial support we provide society when something really bad happens, light bulb kind of goes on a little bit. That's like, this is important. This isn't, a bunch of old white guys sitting around a mahogany table smoking cigars insurance, or guys at a golf course. This is like real, weak society can't survive without us.
Yeah. And I think that's right. And I think that happens to be true about our industry, and we certainly like being part of that. But honestly, I mean, I guess one thing I'd say is I think my job and part of a company is, if you truly have a mission, you just got to share it with people. People will gravitate towards it, right? And so I think that, while I kind of agree with you that maybe some of the folks who are coming out of school now or in their first job or so may not have a great sense of what insurance is, but they just want to work for a company that cares deeply about their customer.
Yeah.
Like, period. It doesn't really matter who it is. And it's the way that they're going to learn that is when they come in and interview with us and they meet 6 people and we all talked about it. And it's fairly consistent. Like, that's how you prove that you do that. It's not about putting something on your website. It's not about, having a catchy slogan. People are really smart. If they come in for 2 rounds of interviews with us and they're going to meet 10 plus people, the story either sticks or it doesn't. And so I think if it does, I think people gravitate toward that. And I think that you can do that in many industries.
Yeah. Insurance as easy as it should be. It's you certainly displayed that. James Hobson, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Great. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.